Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending today's BIM event. I'm really enjoying hosting this series of BIM webinars stroke workshops. From the feedback we've received so far from previous webinars with Mervyn Richards, OBE, Richard Saxon, CBE, Ralph Montague, Andy Hamer, Peter Trabalco, Ben Woolbank, and David Philp, the industry is taking away some great content, which is, in all fairness, exactly what all us guys here at BIM REC are trying our hardest to accomplish. Excuse me. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Barie Hasib. I am the Managing Director of BIM REC. We are an essential BIM recruitment partner for individuals and organisations looking to really win with BIM. We're really passionate about helping our candidates, clients, and the industry as a whole really overcome any obstacles, challenges throughout your BIM journey. Our next event after today's is on the 30th of April with David Fries, who is the chairman of the SEC NSCC BIM Group. David will be presenting on the 6 Ps of BIM. For additional information with regards to the upcoming events, please don't hesitate to visit bimrec.com/BIM-webinars or join our LinkedIn group, bimrec.com/LIG. I'm joined today, however, it's a privilege and an honour to be joined today by James Salmon. James is the President of Collaborative Construction. James is presenting today on BIM and IPD, why the AEC industry needs a smart built culture. If you do have any questions throughout today's presentation, within the section to the right-hand side, there is a drop-down facility again. It says chat or questions. Please do not hesitate to put any questions in that box, and I shall try to get them across to James for the end of the presentation. With that said, I shall unmute James. And James, you are now the presenter.
Appreciate you having me.
Yep, we can hear you fine.
Okay, everyone, I'm glad to be here. Let me see if I can show my screen.
Excuse me.
Everyone's seeing my screen fine?
There, yes. If you'd just like to open it up to make it a bit wider,
okay.
James, want to see.
Is it on full display now, Barry?
Bear with me 1 second. Yes, it is. Yeah, that's superb.
Okay, very good. Just by way of a very brief introduction, I'm an attorney. I've spent 20 years litigating failed construction projects of every stripe. And in 2007, 2008, I launched a company called Collaborative Construction. And the main service that Collaborative Construction provides is to help owners, contractors, and designers craft legal agreements that puts everyone on the same page so that they can leverage BIM and integrated project delivery. So without further ado, I'll move on to our first slide. Today I'm going to talk about the need for the industry to adopt what I call a smart built culture. The AEC industry needs a smart built culture because we operate in a stupid built culture. It's painful, it's difficult, and I will delve into some of the reasons for that today. The first thing I want to talk about, though, in the context of building a smart built culture, if you want to create a smart built culture, you really need to understand some underlying building blocks that will help you build a foundation upon which a smart built culture can rest. And in order to do that, I need you to understand this concept of a smart game changer. And in a moment, we'll define smart game changer. But for right now, I want you to think about these terms on the screen and combining these things in a way that leads to a smart built culture. So the first box is BIM to the X. BIM to the X, these are your tools and your technologies and your processes that are associated with virtual planning and design tools of all kinds. So if we can have smart technologies that we bring to bear in this smart built culture, we're going to have a lot of success. Secondly, we have to combine what I call IPD to the X, and that is a smart legal framework that supports and enables the BIM on the one hand and what I have labeled CM to the X on the other hand. A shorthand term for CM, construction manager, construction management, that's something you're all familiar with. So if we combine these three things, smart technologies with a smart legal framework that allows us to make more intelligent decisions, and smart humans who are applying these tools and processes appropriately, that all combines to create a smart built culture. So to move on to the next slide, there it is. Let's see here. What is a smart game changer? This slide summarizes that concept very briefly. A smart game changer, something like Apple's iPhone, that was a smart game changer in the arena in which it came into the marketplace. And all smart game changers are characterized by what I have listed here. First of all, they're simple. You know, the old keep it simple, stupid concept is critical to a smart game changer. Second, they're scalable. So a smart game changer fits the existing systems, but it can be expanded as necessary. A smart game changer is also meaningful. That is, it purposefully adds value and solves problems. A smart game changer is actionable. It can be deployed in the real world now. It's relational, so it integrates disparate silos in industries that have not heretofore been connected, and it creates wholesale new connections between those silos and brings people out of their silos and creates this relational interaction. And finally, a smart game changer is transformational. So it changes the status quo and it disrupts stale processes. So with that understanding of the term smart game changer in mind, let's move on to another important concept, which is big data. I always refer to big data by the shorthand of V to the fifth power, and V to the fifth just means that you're taking into account the volume of the data that you are encountering, the variety of that data, how many different kinds there are, the velocity at which that data is traveling, and very importantly, the value of that data, and then finally, the veracity of the data. Is the data being delivered to you believable? So when you combine the 5 V's of big data, they have important application in a little further down the road here. Well, hold on. All right, so we should be looking at federated BIM, which is Humpty Dumpty BIM, and it's my contention that federated BIM, which is when we cobble together the Frankenstein of a BIM in Navisworks, that is not a game changer. It is in the sense that a lot of the enterprises that have put that BIM together and used it internally, they view it as a game changer in their world, but Humpty Dumpty BIM or federated BIM is not a game changer for owners. And the reason for that is conveyed here in this slide by the blocks that you're looking at. At Collaborative Construction, we often host workshops, and one of the things that I have clients at the workshops do is to build Katie's castle. And Katie's castle is built off of an RFP where Katie calls for a castle, and everyone puts the castle together. And we label these blocks that you're looking at as coming from different BIM tools or BIM platforms. So if you could imagine, the yellow blocks are all Autodesk, the green blocks are all Tekla, the red blocks are all CATIA, and the blue blocks all come from ArchiCAD. When you have that castle completed on your desk, I walk over and scoop it off into a box, and the blocks scatter and fall into the box. And we hand it to the owner at the table, and we say, here's your box of BIM blocks. And that is what most of our owners get from us at the end of a project where we promise to deliver BIM. We're delivering a jumbled box of BIM blocks, or a Humpty Dumpty BIM that the owner has no hope of ever putting back together again. And so one of the things that we need to do in moving forward with BIM and leveraging BIM as a smart game changer is to ensure that our owner clients are receiving a digital asset that is of value to them. And we'll delve into that a little further in a moment. So to move on to the next slide, we're going to talk about BIM to the X as a game changer. And when I define BIM, I am not just talking about building information modeling. I'm also talking about building information metrics and building information management. The building information model itself represents the design information graphically in the virtual world and instantly. So that has a tremendous amount of value, but that is only one very narrow aspect of BIM. And I want my clients to always understand that BIM to the X is exponential, and BIM to the X is much broader than just building information modeling. So what we do is we talk about the ways that all that rich data that's flowing through the BIM can be transformed into a business intelligence model. How much of that rich data that's flowing is actually a business intelligence metric? How much of that data is business intelligence management? So, in other words, does your BIM represent the business data graphically, virtually, and instantly? So you can substitute and modify these terms in a number of different ways, but I want you to understand that simple BIM, just BIM as a 3D rendering, is barely scratching the surface. And what we want to think about in the context of creating a smart built culture is a much broader BIM definition of BIM. And finally, the other thing that I'll do is I'll talk about bureaucracy innovation modeling. And that's really important when I'm having this conversation with public owners. They often perceive themselves to be shackled by certain procurement laws and regulations, and they don't understand how to get out from under those procurement laws and regulations and move to a procurement method or procurement model that works better with BIM and will allow them to do something like what I would call IPD light, so that you're at least utilizing many of the tools and processes and contractual concepts associated with IPD, even though you're on a public works project. It's a whole lecture for another day, but here we are again talking about BIM in a much broader sense than just building information modeling. So if we treat BIM to the X as a digital asset that we're going to hand over to an owner, that the owner can extract value from, the way I like to define BIM to the X is as this digital asset that creates and streams the right variety of data in volumes that are delivered at a manageable velocity that enables the owner to extract real value from verified data. So there you see the v to the fifth power with all of those components of big data being embedded in the concept of BIM. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Kenneth Jernigan's book, Big BIM, but his concept of Big BIM is what we need to be thinking of in terms of BIM to the X and how we want to build this smart built culture. So another shorthand way of referring to BIM to the X is to say that it Googleizes your built environment. So if we turn now to the next slide, where I have placed a summary version of the AIA California Council's project-centric definition of IPD. I think this is a helpful starting point for wrapping your mind around the concept of integrated project delivery. But my criticism of IPD as a project-centric tool is that in reality we are simply managing the problems that manifest themselves in a wasteful system. And I will delve into that a little bit deeper in a few minutes. But for now, let's look at this list of characteristics of an IPD project. So an IPD project is one where the business interests of the various stakeholders are aligned and there's some sharing of risk and reward. The financial gain in the project is placed at risk and is in some way dependent upon the project outcome. Joint project control is an important aspect of IPD, and controlled by the owner and key designers and key builders is joint, and they share both decision making and responsibility. Usually a good IPD project is characterized by a multi-party agreement where at least the owner, contractor, and designer have signed an agreement where they're all on the same page. And then importantly, you will have joining agreements whereby various specialists in the design realm or trade contractors or suppliers join that agreement. Sometimes that doesn't happen, and if you don't have the new stakeholders, the new players in the game join the core instrument, then you wind up with a disparate circumstance in which one set of legal agreements controls one set of relationships and a separate legal agreement controls other relationships. You want as many people as you can, as many of your stakeholders as possible on the same page. People talk about, here equally effective interlocking agreements. I find that very difficult to achieve as counsel for an IPD team, to allow different instruments to be signed that are, quote, interlocking by reference back. It's much easier just to have a central instrument with a central code of conduct, and everyone that joins the team agrees to be bound thereby. Sorry about that. That's our inter-office intercom. Finally, limited liability among the owner, the key designers, and builders is a key feature of IPD. So those are the yellow boxes here contain the essence of the characteristics of an IPD project, and I'm talking project-centric IPD. We'll define IPD to the X in a moment. Now, the other thing that I really like about the AIA California Council's definition of IPD is that they have this great chart that explains, they have it listed as IPD essential principles, and they start out with the idea that the whole point of a good IPD project is to optimize the whole. And in order to get to this, you need these. And then they list early and clear definition of value and intense collaboration. So you need those two things if you want to optimize the whole. Well, where do those arise from? Early and clear value definition and good collaboration arise out of trust, trust-based relationships, respectful interaction and between the parties, joint ownership of responsibility and risk, and integration of the team as a whole, which in turn are fostered by this list of things: transparency, a safe environment in which to work, both physically, emotionally, and legally, shared risk and reward, and then good, strong technology piece of your puzzle. So if you have clients who are wondering what IPD looks like, the AIA California Council definition of IPD that was published last, I believe, July of 2014. That is their most recent publication. It has this chart in it, and it's a short paper, maybe 3 to 5 pages long, but it really does a nice job of summarizing the concept of IPD. So with that definition of IPD in mind, that's your project-centric definition of IPD. That's not what collaborative construction is talking about when we talk about IPD to the X, because what we're talking about is a fix for the system and not simply a tool for managing the problems that are associated with a typical construction project. I'm a big advocate of all things lean, the Toyota way, Lean Six Sigma, that entire thought process. And the father of a bunch of the great ideas in that arena is Edward Deming. And Deming pointed out that you must focus on fixing the system. Otherwise, you will just spend your time dealing with problems, trying to solve problems, and he said 99% of the time you're going to be better off fixing the system than trying to simply solve the problem. And that's what collaborative construction is driving at when we suggest that we need a smart built culture that will allow us to fix the system in the AEC industry and not simply put band-aids on existing problems. So that's why we define IPD to the X as this life cycle centric legal framework that supports that smart built culture. So when I talk about a life cycle centric legal framework, that is very different than the legal framework associated with the project centric IPD concept. Okay? Because what I want to do is I want to bring a legal framework to bear on the life cycle of facilities and infrastructure. So I want us to be able to do what's described in the slide here. I want to have integrated, innovative, intelligent, informed individuals and teams who come together and they plan, procure, produce projects and processes that they can then leverage in design, delivery, and decision making as integrated teams in all phases of all capital projects. And I want them to do so within a legal framework that supports all of those tasks and processes and activities, this IPD to the X. So for example, integrated programming decisions is something that we talk to our owner clients about all the time. It's so important to have a good program, a good brief for your project before you launch. You have to have a RFP that is intelligent, and you have to make sure that you have involved the other key stakeholders in that process if you want it to be truly integrated. So I think that owners are far more well served by selecting their teams in advance and working with them on the integrated programming decisions. But at a minimum, you've got to involve your own personnel who will be utilizing the facilities. And so those folks, your operations personnel, your maintenance personnel, and the end users of your facility, they all have to buy in to your programming decisions. Next is intelligent planning and design. This is very much has BIM to the X at the heart of the process. We're talking about planning and designing during the launch phase, and this is where we want to have collaborative design processes going on. This is where we want to be involving those trades and the specialty designers and the specialty trade contractors. We want to have as many of those in-depth conversations as we can about what really needs to go into the design as early as we can. Next is what I call informed procurement delivery. This is your pre-construction scope and scheduling and budgeting piece, and this is where you need to begin to reach out to your suppliers, to the suppliers of materials, to your trade contractors, and in the sense that they're suppliers of labor. They're also the suppliers of specialty design services in the form of shop drawings and other special skills that they bring to bear on the delivery of their scope of work. So all of this needs to be taken into account, and again, there's so much value to be had by planning in advance and working through issues in advance. It seems odd and it seems sometimes backwards, but you will reap so many hours of savings in the actual process if you will invest a few hours in the planning phase of these processes. Next, we have innovative process deployed. This is lean construction. This is last planner system. This is a concept that one of Collective Construction's sister organizations has developed, something called the first planner system. All of these are Lean Six Sigma oriented tools and processes that are designed to increase efficiency and productivity in the actual construction process. But these are all informed by and supported by the good pre-con scope, schedule, and budgeting, the good planning and design during launch, and the great programming that came before. And then ultimately, you know, I call it inspired product distribution. You know, what is the business purpose of the facility or the infrastructure that is being put in place? And, you know, are we delivering an inspired product and distributing it intelligently and effectively? So, you know, a lot of owners, when you're an owner of like a Toyota or a P&G or a GE, you're vested heavily in your plant because your plant is producing your product. When you're just operating out of an office complex or your school or your, sometimes, you know, in hospitals don't view the facility as a key component part in the delivery of their critical services or their critical product. We all need to begin to think in terms of our facility and our infrastructure as being a core piece of our business purpose and what we do and how we do it. So I know that's a long time on one slide, but there's some important stuff in there. So the next piece of the puzzle is CM to the X. So this is, in a nutshell, it is respectful and continuous improvement over time. That is my takeaway of all of the lean-oriented literature that I've ever read, all of the Lean Six Sigma, all of the Toyota Way, all those kinds of things. anticipate that you're going to be respectful to one another, and you're going to continuously strive to improve. Now, when I say CM to the X, I'm talking about this laundry list of things that can be abbreviated CM. So there's change management. This is a critical issue that confronts the AEC industry, and especially anyone in the industry that is contemplating adopting BIM or IPD processes or any of these lean construction-oriented techniques. That is a lot of change, and you're going to encounter the issues related to change management when you do that. We're all familiar with construction management. I suggest that we also have cultural management to tackle, as there is a new culture is going to emerge once you've begun to adopt BIM and IPD and lean processes, and that culture is going to inform those things, and those new tools and processes are going to impact that culture. Construction models, change models, cultural models, construction metrics, cultural metrics. You know, you get the idea that this concept of CM to the X is very broad, just like the definition of BIM to the X is very broad and IPD to the X is very broad. So how are we to create a smart built culture for the AEC industry? I take a very simple approach to this. I say that we have to identify the problem, so let's define the problem accurately. Let's identify a solution, and then let's formulate a strategy for deploying that solution, and then let's execute a game plan. So the remainder of my presentation is going to roll through these issues, but before we get there, I want to talk briefly about the image of the guy here straddling the rail. This is the AEC industry writ large right here in this image. We have an industry that relies on design, bid, build as its primary delivery model. And design, bid, build is very wasteful. We'll delve into that more momentarily. But it has encouraged the development of waste-based business models. And so in the industry, we have waste-based business models that depend on extracting money from waste and inefficiency to earn a profit. And I argue with the term earn a profit in that statement. You know, I think that it's simpler to say that they just extract profit from waste. That is what a waste-based business model does. And we have lots of waste-based business models in construction because our primary procurement and delivery model, design, bid, build, is very wasteful and inefficient. And so it rewards the use of waste-based business models. The reason the man in the picture is straddling a rail in this presentation is because that's what we as an industry are doing when we try to put one foot in a smart built culture environment where we're going to deliver projects on a BIM platform in an IPD environment, and then meanwhile we're going to continue to procure and win work and deliver other projects in a waste-based scenario where design, bid, build is the delivery model demanded by the owner. So it puts the stakeholders in the AEC industry in a very difficult position. We have to straddle this rail because owners continue to demand design, bid, build as the delivery model of choice. And it is very difficult to deliver on a project under design, bid, build where you utilize a strong BIM platform and you try to do something resembling IPD. And the reasons for that are manifold, but we'll get into some of them in the rest of this presentation. So I just want you to be aware that we are being forced to straddle the fence with respect to two diametrically opposed business models, a waste-based model and a value-based model, in choosing whether to pursue work under design, bid, build, or to try to deliver work in a new way on a BIM platform in an IPD environment. So initially I said that I wanted to tackle this by identifying the problem, and this chart captures the problem. I suspect that many of you have seen this before. This is an updated version of Dr. Paul Techholz's study, in which he looks very carefully at labor productivity in construction over the last 50 years. And the red line on the bottom shows that no matter which of several different measures you use to look at labor productivity in the construction industry, that labor productivity has been flat or declining from 1964 through 2012. That's really rather remarkable. And by contrast, in non-farm sectors of the economy from 1964 through 2012, you can see that the blue line above shows the upward trajectory of increased labor productivity in all non-farm sectors of the economy minus construction. This is just a damning set of data for construction, and those of us who understand this and are immersed in it have a hard time conveying this, the immensity of the problem, to others in the industry who really think that what they're doing is highly efficient. They think they're really doing a good job in many instances, and the reality is to the contrary here. We have these are all U.S.-based statistics. This is U.S. labor data, but this study has been replicated in Europe and in Australia and in Asia. It's a common affliction in the industry. So when you have a waste-based culture that allows labor productivity to remain flat or decline over a 50-year period, that is a problem for your industry. And what we see is that there is a 40 to 60% waste rate on capital projects in construction. So what that means is that out of every $100 that's dedicated to a capital project, there is 40 to 60% of that is wasted, and it is wasted in a myriad of ways. Much of it is wasted on labor, and you can see here why labor would be a cost that you would think the efficiency could improve, but it's also wasted on materials. It's also wasted on time and scheduling. And so if you just go through the list here, you will find that the problem that we have manifests itself in impacts scope, it impacts cost, it impacts schedule, and it impacts quality on every construction project. So the solution to that problem is to replace that wasteful culture, that waste-based culture, with a smart-built culture that plans earlier, procures more intelligently, designs more collaboratively, builds on continuous improvement, operates infrastructure smarter, and maintains facilities and infrastructure predictively. So that seems like a pretty straightforward proposition, but requiring that or achieving that in the industry has proven to be very, very difficult. So the strategy is to adopt a smart built culture that is integrated, collaborative, and trust-based, and we want that smart built culture to replace our current construction culture, which is fragmented, adversarial, and mistrustful. So the source of much of our problem in the industry is actually the contracts that we sign, because the contracts that we sign in construction reinforce the fragmentation of our team. We separate each other into silos, and we have everybody sign a separate contract in construction. And those same contracts create these adversarial relationships, because when you try to figure out, you look to the contract to decide how to resolve your differences, it mandates an adversarial process. And we experience a high level of mistrust in the AEC industry, and it is in large part because our contracts fragment our teams and force us into adversarial relationships. Plus, and this is important, we have this waste-based business model that we're relying on, and when you're relying on a waste-based business model, you're trying to extract your profit from some of that 40 to 60% waste rate that we observed. And when you do that, the way you do that is by taking advantage of someone else's mistake, or taking advantage of inefficiency that you identify somewhere in the process, taking advantage of bad drawings, taking advantage of someone else being late to the job. You know, the unfortunate reality is that when you're operating under a waste-based business model, no one in your organization is above earning some of your profit, extracting some of your profit out of that waste and inefficiency by screwing somebody else. And when you screw somebody else in construction, that creates mistrust. So at Collaborative Construction, we've been thinking about ways to engage in what we call frugal innovation. And frugal innovation is something where it's a concept whereby you create a scarce resource by leveraging an abundant resource. And it's our contention that a smart built culture can create trust, which is the rarest resource in construction, by leveraging the industry's belief in the golden rule. And so by creating what we call golden rule alliances among our clients, we are trying to create trust by leveraging their willingness to believe in the golden rule and to abide by the golden rule. Now, I'm an attorney with 20 plus years of experience litigating failed construction projects, so you can rest assured that I do not believe that just because somebody agrees to abide by the golden rule that they are going to do so. So we have a code of conduct associated with this that allows us to collect the scorpion stingers at the door, if you will, and ensure that our instrument has teeth and people can be held accountable. But the bottom line is that we want to create an atmosphere of trust. We want to create trust-based relationships. We want to have a mechanism whereby we can create this rare resource, trust, out of an abundant resource, which is this belief in the golden rule. So let's move on to the action plan. How do we build a foundation for a smart built culture? Well, the first step is to identify smart game changers, and we did that in the early part of this presentation. We talked about BIM to the X, CM to the X, and IPD to the X. You want to create a culture that's based on trust. The Golden Rule Alliance concept helps you begin to move down that path. And then we want to deploy built solutions where BIM to the X plus CM to the X plus IPD to the X equals a smart built culture. We didn't have time today in this presentation to cover built solutions and what those are. If anybody has questions about that, I'd be happy to answer some of those offline. So let's put our smart built culture concept up here at the top, and let's throw in our 3 smart game changers. Okay, so we've got BIM to the X in the lower left, we've got CM to the X in the right, and IPDX to the X agreements below. So we want to build a smart built culture. So what you need to do is you need to build a solid foundation. And one of the most solid foundations there is the arch. And we've all seen it in architecture throughout the centuries. You look at the Roman Colosseum, you look at virtually any famous architecture, and you're going to see arches. Arches are really important because they support 2 different parts of a building and provide a foundation upon which additional building can take place. So here in this arch structure, you saw the blocks come in to the screen. I want you to imagine the blocks on the left-hand side of the screen as blocks that are carved utilizing what I would call BIM to the X tools and processes. So those blocks on the left-hand side get carved using your BIM and your technology tools. All right. On the other side of the arch is our CM to the X. These are all our lean processes, our lean construction, last planner system, first planner, Lean Six Sigma, the Toyota way, just-in-time delivery, just-in-time logistics and supply. So if all these blocks on the right-hand side are carved using CM to the X tools, imagine if you had built an arch and you had put all the blocks in place. How would you go about doing that? One of the things that you need to do when you're building with masonry blocks is to have some mortar to hold the blocks together. So I want you to imagine that all the joints in this structure are held together with mortar, and that mortar is collaboration, okay, and trust. So you mix your mortar out of collaboration and trust, and you use that mortar to hold your blocks together at every level of this foundation. So if you mix in a lot of trust and collaboration as your mortar to hold your bricks together, you can build a really nice arch. Now, what is critical is that you have a good keystone, because I don't know if you've ever built an arch and had to hold up the 2 sides of the arch and not have a keystone. If you don't have a good keystone to support both halves of the arch, your arch will collapse. And the IPD to the X agreements, this new legal framework, if you will, is critical to holding this arch up. And one of the examples that I use as a bad agreement, which you try to plug in as a keystone in this process, are the federal procurement laws and the federal procurement statutes in particular. Those federal procurement statutes for procuring planning, design, and construction services for the federal government in the U.S. are extraordinarily bad instruments to serve as this keystone. And ironically, the federal government wants BIM in many instances. They want IPD. They want some of these CM to the X tools and processes brought to bear, but they deliver you a keystone that is made of rubble and concrete and bricks that have just been mixed together, and it's terrible. It's not a good keystone. And so you really need a strong keystone, and that's what a good IPD agreement is. In this image here, we're still very project centric. We're talking about building an arch here for one facility, but we can take that a little further if we expand it, and we'll do that here momentarily. One thing I want to focus on just briefly is that going back to Dr. Paul Techholz's study on the labor productivity rates, I like to talk about the iron triangle in construction. Everyone is familiar with scope, cost, and time, and in the center you have quality. Okay, so you can increase or decrease someone's scope of work, and the increase or decrease is going to impact the cost, and it's going to impact time. You can increase time or decrease time, and that's going to impact scope and cost, and in many instances quality. Same with cost. So all of these things are tied up together. So when we look at design, bid, build, and the fact that it has a 40 to 60% waste rate, what that tells us is that scoping is wasteful, costing is wasteful, scheduling is wasteful, and we all know that lack of quality at the end of the day is wasteful. It manifests itself as rework, manifests itself as failures and injuries on the job. I mean, there's myriad ways that lack of quality results in waste. But we all know that there is some waste in all of this. So I wanted you to have this image of the iron triangle in your mind's eye as we go on to the next slide. So how do we build a legal framework that will support a smart built culture? My contention is that we have to build a series of these arches. Okay, we can't just build one because that's just project centric. Okay, that's just one project at a time. We need to fix the system. We don't need to fix one project at a time. I don't know how many of you are familiar with an Ono circle, but one of the Japanese leaders of the lean continuous improvement movement that Toyota brought to the U.S. in manufacturing used to utilize something called the Ono circle, and he would draw a circle on the factory floor and have a new protege stand in that circle for several hours at a time and make a list of all the problems, all the things that he observed while he was in the circle. And then they would discuss how to improve the system to address the problems that were observed. And my contention with respect to construction is that you could put a fifth grader of average intelligence in an Ono circle on any construction project in the world, and after a few hours that fifth grader could produce a list of problems that it might take several lifetimes to solve or overcome. And part of the reason that we have so many problems is because the system is broken. We have a system that is creating problems, and one of the ways that you can solve a lot of problems in one fell swoop is by adjusting your system. Fix the system and you can eliminate many problems. So this image that we're looking at here, this aqueduct, I use this to help my owner clients understand that they've got to build a series of arches that support and enable a series of different tasks and facilities and different infrastructure and different departments. There's a lot of different things that go into building this legal framework that is going to support and enable the delivery of that digital asset that we talked about before. So remember, if we want a smart built culture, it has to rest on a solid foundation. And that foundation is going to support the flow of information across the aqueduct. And remember what that flow is going to look like. It's going to be the V to the fifth power. And remember, V to the fifth power refers to the flow of big data. That's your volume, your variety, your velocity, your value, and your veracity. So in order to make that happen, you have to have a better legal framework than we have now. We have a very piecemeal approach to the legal framework that supports or doesn't support BIM and IPD in the current environment. So we need to improve that. So let's turn our attention again to the iron triangle, and let's talk about what it looks like in a smart built culture. So you still have quality as the goal. That's still at the center of the iron triangle. We still have our three component parts: scope, cost, and schedule. So here we have scope, cost, and time, all three of which impact quality. And what my contention with respect to the creation of a smart built culture is that we will be able to add this circle of collaboration around that iron triangle and carve out some additional value, because remember, in construction we're talking about 40 to 60% waste on existing projects, okay? So if there's 40 to 60% waste in capital resources as deployed now, you have to have some room around the edges where we can make some progress with a smart built culture. And that's where your value added business models come into play. If you're truly a value based business model, if your enterprise is delivering services in exchange for being paid for adding value, then you are going to be in a very different position than an enterprise that is looking to extract their profit from waste and inefficiency. And so there's going to be some extra value here inside the collaboration circle next to the quality triangle, inside this iron triangle, if you will. Same thing between scope and cost, and same thing again between the time and the cost. So if we can develop a smart built culture in the industry that leverages value-based business models and begins to get at some of this additional value that we know is available because we're wasting 40 to 60% of our resources in capital projects, then I think we can make some really good progress. So that's the smart built lecture in a nutshell. And I will turn it back over to Barie. I think we have, oh, by the way, y'all had a great set of questions. I don't think we have time to get through all the questions that were submitted, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to write answers to these questions and post them on my blog, and Barry's going to get you a link to the written responses to all of the questions that were asked by today's attendees. But I think Barie has a list of a few questions that we identified, and we're going to try to get through some of those.
Thank you, James. I appreciate we're only scheduled for an hour, so I'm not sure what your schedule is like actually. If you do have 5-10 minutes now to run through the questions, pre-questions, and some questions that we've had since being online as well.
Sure.
Okay. Fantastic.
Apologize for
not a problem at all. Thank you. It's been a very informative webinar. I'm sure everybody would agree. So thank you for your time and thank you for putting this together. Right. Okay. Question 1 is, BIM is well established in the architecture building industry. How widespread is the implementation of BIM and IPD in the civil transportation industry? And can you talk about some case studies about how BIM has been utilized on a civil transportation project and quantify the benefits gained over the traditional project delivery?
Sure. What I would do is point everyone to the Department of Transportation out of Arizona. In the state of Arizona in the U.S., they've adopted a set of BIM guidelines for the Department of Transportation, and they are focusing very heavily on civil and transportation. I found this image online earlier today. Sunt Construction, it's S-U-N-D-T, out of Arizona, is utilizing laser scanning and some ground penetrating radar and some other tools in order to create a good BIM before they start. And the bottom line with respect to utilizing BIM and IPD in a civil arena is that you're going to avoid some really tragic consequences in many instances. One of the very first cases I ever litigated was a DC-9 cat that drug a ripper through a 10-inch gas main on in Wyoming alongside interstate when they were widening interstate, and nobody realized that that gas main was there. Someone was horribly burned, and the litigation drug on for years. I've been involved in cases where we found, unfound clay sewer pipes were at the bottom of the dig and busted open and had to be rerouted. And in civil and transportation projects, just a few truckloads of dirt difference can make a big difference in somebody's bid. And if you're off by 2 or 3 inches or a foot or more, that can translate into millions of dollars of additional cost. So I think BIM and IPD used in civil transportation is something that needs to be done more, and you will find some really stark benefits. I don't have a particular case study to point you to at this moment, but I would say take a look at the Arizona Department of Transportation guidelines, and if you reached out to Sunt Construction, they might be able to get your hands around a specific case study.
Sure, fantastic, thank you. Is there a difference between IPD contracts and BIM IPD delivery systems?
Yes, there's a fundamental difference between IPD agreements and IPD and BIM as a delivery system. An agreement is simply a mechanism whereby parties agree to adjust their legal relationship. So it lays out the duties, rights, and responsibilities of the parties in writing, and that is the written agreement whereby you as a group agree to adjust your legal relationship if necessary, and it lays out the scope and nature of that relationship. IPD and BIM as the component parts of a delivery system are something altogether different. They are controlled by that agreement, but they're actually the culture via which you agree to deliver everything you agreed to deliver in the contracts.
Fantastic, thank you. Next question, best practices to transfer data not involved in IFC standards, survey, electrical, namespace. Could you suggest CFM platforms or just interfaces with IO, Revit and or AutoCAD integration?
Yeah, I'm going to wimp out a little bit on this one. I'm not going to endorse a particular platform. What I'm going to say is that our industry needs to move to an open source BIM HTML. Okay, I think that IFC, Bill East's COBE tools and processes are some really good places to start with accumulating your data, but I think fundamentally we need to move as an industry to an open source platform where all the data resides in a big tank and we can create apps that mine that data as necessary and as needed, the way Google mines data on the web right now. And what I would suggest is that since construction and the AEC industry generally have chosen to remain so far behind the rest of the world with respect to adopting big data oriented business processes and tools, that we ought to be able to do in our industry what many countries on the African continent have done over the last 20 years or so. If you look at Africa, at countries in Africa right now, they may be lacking many resources from an infrastructure perspective, but one thing that they do better than everybody else in the world is they have a mobile banking platform, and you can bank electronically on your cell phone in countries in Africa with ease. And part of the reason that they're able to do that is they didn't get bogged down in the defective and paper-ridden banking systems that we developed in the 18th century and to which we cling to this very day. They have a very nimble payment and banking system on the continent in Africa. And my contention is that in construction, we ought to just leapfrog over and past all the spreadsheets and all of the ways of, formulating, putting the data in order, and go right straight to an open BIM platform where we can mine that data with a Google-like tools and processes that allow us to leverage, exactly what we need at the moment in time when we need it. It's back to my concept of what that digital asset ought to deliver to that owner if you leverage V to the fifth power.
Sure, fantastic. Thank you. Next question: how to organise and run design charrette? Excuse me.
I know there are a lot of designers out there who do have their own vision of how to do design charrettes. My approach is completely different. I tackle it much the way I tackle a jury trial, and I want to be able to teach people about the concepts that are critical to my case in, I want them to see it, I want them to hear it, and I want them to touch it. And so I start my clients down this path by having them come together in a workshop, and we test planning, design, and construction processes on a BIM platform and in an IPD environment on a very rudimentary scale in a workshop together with building blocks first. Then once we are comfortable with and everybody understands the big picture, then we move from there to a charitable dollhouse. So the next step in the process is to build a dollhouse for charity, sell that dollhouse, and give the money to the charity. And preferably to do so by recruiting 4 or 5 different teams and letting those integrated teams form with an owner, a designer, and a constructor, and let them come together and build that dollhouse virtually first, and then physically build that dollhouse. And if you have an event at the end of the year, you can sell 4 or 5 dollhouses at your end of the year fundraiser, and you can give all that money to charity. Once you've accomplished that, then pivot on around and do a design charrette that is BIM and IPD enabled on a specific charitable project in the real world. So do a Habitat for Humanity house, build a new shelter, a bus stop, build a new facility for a school, do something, put a new roof on a house for an elderly couple, do something charitable as a team utilizing BIM-enabled design platform tools and an IPD process. Complete that charitable project as a team. Now you're ready to tackle an actual pilot project for your enterprise for an owner client that hopefully has been involved with you from building Katie's Castle in the first workshop through to the dollhouse onto the charitable work in the real world, and now you're going to do a pilot project for a specific owner. And don't get drunk on your own whiskey. You don't all know what you're doing yet. Keep working at it together, figuring out where, is there another chink in the bricks that needs a little more mortar? And remember, that mortar is collaboration and trust. And once you can do a pilot project, now you're ready to go out and hold yourself out as an enterprise that's ready to join, more random teams of individuals and help form and lead IPD or BIM-enabled project. So I know that the term design charrette is typically a architectural or design term, and that's something that designers do for their clients, usually in a silo away from the dark beady eyes of those evil contractors. And what I'm suggesting is that y'all have to get together and do it together.
Well, everybody needs to be more of an angel like you are, James. Next question. Why is it very difficult to convince people to implement BIM for construction projects? And what would most suitable benefits from BIM for a construction company?
Lack of trust is the reason most clients I encounter give for not wanting to implement BIM or implement IPD. If they don't trust one another, then they're not going to be able to move forward. So in order to break people out of their comfort zone, you have to show them that they're going to be able to make money off a value-based business model. So what you have to show them is that if you propose to a owner client that you will deliver value and you expect to earn a profit by delivering value, that's a very different business model than bidding in the dark and then looking for ways to extract your profit from somebody else's waste or mistake. So the number one step is to build that trust by convincing clients that they can actually make money off a value-based business model. Then, importantly, you need the owners not to turn around and screw them and try to whittle them down to some tiny number, based on, some prior bids. You need to say, look, owners, you have to be willing to pay for the value. Sure. And that, of course, leads to this issue of compensation models, and that's something that can be hammered out in some more detail in a good IPD workshop where the team is coming together to put their IPD agreement in place. With respect to the question of what benefits flow from BIM to a construction company, it's my contention that general contractors have a whole lot more low-hanging fruit available to them than the designers do. The designers just need to adopt BIM and these tools and processes to survive and stay in business, because the next generation is already operating on these platforms, and they're going to leave you in the dust if you don't get on these platforms. Sure. General contractors have a tremendous number of the pieces of fruit that you could pick. So there is increased constructability analysis. You can do that. You can do material takeoffs. You can do logistics. If you're doing BIM and IPD right, you ought to be able to have just-in-time delivery on your construction site. That means you won't have a cluttered construction site with, construction materials usually arrive either 2 weeks too early or 2 weeks too late.
Yeah.
That's the typical delivery model, and that's because we always allow the trades to purchase and procure delivery of their own materials. We don't centralize that process and coordinate it with the Gantt chart that says, this is critical path and this is what needs to be going on. So you really need just-in-time delivery in construction, and it's completely possible if you leverage BIM and IPD. So there's a ton of low-hanging fruit for general contractors, and you'll see, if you look around the industry, you see Skanska and Balfour, Beatty, and Turner, and all the big boys and girls in the general contracting arena, they've all captured BIM talent and brought it in-house, and they're doing BIM all the time.
Sure.
But they're doing BIM for themselves. They're not doing BIM for anybody else, and they're not doing BIM for owners necessarily.
Sure.
They're certainly telling owners that they can do BIM, and then they're tossing Humpty Dumpty BIM over the wall to them.
Sure, fantastic. Okay. Next question. A smart built culture makes sense, but what about local building knowledge and construction? Will global BIM culture somehow destroy our diverse and rich culture of building? As a BIM specialist, I find the methodology urgent and needed within the construction market. And then what about the technical side of this way of working, only for technicians or also for owners and other people in general? Should BIM be more easy to use in order to reach more professionals?
Local rules in construction, okay? Construction is just like real estate. It's all about location, location, location.
Sure.
So it's absolutely critical that you get local buy-in to whatever the built culture you want to create is. And what I've found is the clients that I've worked with, there's a top-down and a bottom-up aspect to good cultural change. So you need the grassroots piece, you need to be working from the base up, but you also need buy-in from the top in order to achieve good cultural change within an organization. So I think that's important. The other thing that I think we all need to realize is that smart BIM ought to be the goal, okay? It should be, as I say, easy peasy lemon squeezy, all right? So when I log on to Priceline or one of these other travel sites, I am looking for a flight from here to Calgary, and I need that flight on a certain date. And I could not possibly care less what the software is doing back behind the scenes. I want to know when the flight leaves and how much it is, and I might, depending on what I value that day, I might want to sort it by price, or I might want to sort it by time, okay? That is the way our BIM tools need to work. That is the way that digital asset that we deliver to owners needs to work. The interface needs to be mind-numbingly simple. It needs to be dummy-proof. It needs to be so simple that a lawyer could do it, okay? And if you can make it simple enough for a lawyer in your office to do it, then anybody will be able to do it.
Brilliant, thank you. Your analogies are fantastic as well, by the way, James. Have another question as well, and then perhaps we can move on to a couple of questions that have come in live, if you're still fine with time. One question that always pops up at each of these webinars. We always talk about BIM is needed for future, but still a lot of companies are reluctant to embark on BIM due to the cost of investment and limitation of the software and processes to help them adopt BIM. Do you have any advice?
Yes, bite the bullet
Same
and
advice
get it done. I mean, the BIM and IPD are coming, and the enterprises that don't adapt to it and adopt it are going to die.
Sure. Very much so. Okay, fantastic. Do you have a couple of minutes as well to go over a couple of other questions?
Sure.
Fantastic. Ralph has asked, for the most part, the culture, the processes, and the outcome is determined by the employer/client. But at the same time, clients are really interested aren't really interested how the building gets built. They just want it. How do we get clients to become informed and committed to driving smart culture?
I don't think that you can expect all owners to buy in to the need for a smart, intelligent, useful digital asset right off the bat, okay? What we're dealing with here is this transition phase, all right? So if you think about a smart building, those of us who are immersed in these processes, we can envision a building that is able to self-report on energy usage. We can imagine a building that's able to send out a SOS that a pipe has burst in a cold weather scenario in the basement. We know what a smart building can do, okay? The vast majority of the owners out there have no idea what a smart building can do because it's something they've never thought about. It's the difference between a smartphone and an old dumb cell phone.
Yeah.
And I carried one of those flip phones for years, and I was reluctant. I resisted purchasing a smartphone. And I resisted because my position was a telephone is for talking, and my cell phone lets me talk, and what more could I want? And I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah, sure.
Okay? So now I couldn't, I couldn't have stayed in touch with Barie today and made sure that we had all the things still, all the balls still in the air for this event if I hadn't had my cell phone, because I wasn't able to stay in front of my desk tied to my computer all day.
Yeah.
But because of my smartphone, I was able to continue to be productive. We don't know what we don't know about what smart buildings can do. So we've got two or three classes of owners. We've got cutting-edge owners who are interested in being green, interested in leveraging all these new tools and processes, and they want to be out on the cutting edge. Okay, those are the clients that everybody would love to work with. They're pretty rare right now. We've got another class of clients that are that understand the value of their facilities. These are your manufacturing clients, your oil and gas clients. They know that the infrastructure they put in the ground or the factory that they build is a key cog in their business wheel. Okay? Yeah. It is critically important to them that they get it the way they want it. A lot of those enterprises think they already have the solution. They don't think that the AEC industry has anything new to add. The last few times they contracted with someone from the AEC industry without holding their hand and holding their nose to the grindstone every day, the project went off the rails and wound up in litigation, and they don't want to deal with that again. And so they single source it. They they'll purchase your planning, design, construction services on a time and materials basis and fire 4 or 5 outfits before they get to somebody that's actually doing the job. Yeah. They know what they want, and they don't think you can ever do anything better for them. And then the vast majority of clients are the ones that don't have a clue that a smart building could benefit them in any way. The building or the facility that they're in is just the place where they house their workers, or it's a place where they store some of their product. It's not a core component of their business enterprise. One big example that is the counter to that is hospitals. The business purpose of a hospital is to not kill people.
Putting it on that.
Yeah, and if that's your business purpose, then the facility within which you operate becomes really important. You don't, if you don't have oxygen tanks for people that need oxygen, they're going to die. If you don't have refrigerated medicine for people that need refrigerated medicine, they're going to die. If you don't have sterile equipment, they're going to die. I mean, there are all these issues in the medical arena that are tied back to the quality of your facility. So for that reason, we see a lot of medical centers, medical office buildings and hospitals and the like rising to the fore and really pushing for BIM and IPD oriented processes. But there are a whole lot of owners out there who just check out of the process and don't want to be involved. They want to hire Grubb & Ellis to manage the building when it's done, and they're willing to hire Balfour Beatty or Skanska to build it under a design-build contract for a guaranteed maximum price, and they're thrilled if they don't have to have anybody involved. If somebody insists on having someone involved, they hire a construction manager to go and represent their interests.
Sure.
So, since it's not, they don't view the building and the facilities and infrastructure around them as critical to their business success, they don't dedicate a point person to it, and so you don't have a leadership role filled by an owner. And that's where we as an industry need to step up and be prepared to build integrated teams on our own that are ready to deliver planning, design, and construction services more efficiently as integrated teams that are led on their own without an owner participant, because you're going to have a lot of clients, a lot of owner clients who are either, they're either not present at all, present but causing more trouble than they're worth, or present and know nothing.
Sure. Fantastic. Okay, thank you. One other as well. I wouldn't normally ask people, somebody this question. However, you being the angel that you are, James, the cynic in me thinks the legal profession is currently sitting on a cash cow, a system that pays them twice: once when contracts need to be written, and the second time when the projects fail. So, why would the legal profession push for the system that reduces the chances for failure?
Well, they certainly didn't push for it when I proposed it back at my old law firm in 2007 and 2008. I ran the idea of an integrated practice group that represented our owner clients, our designer clients, and our trades and contractors all at the same time. And they shot it down 2 years in a row. And the word I got back was that the litigation department didn't want to see the golden goose get carried out behind the barn and have its head chopped off. So the cynic in you could be onto something there.
Yeah, sure. Fantastic. One other question as well. I'm cautious of time now. Well, first of all, a lot of thank yous are coming in. A lot of thank yous are coming in, so thank you. Awesome presentation. Rob's asked, I know Dr. Tice Holt's apologies diagram, but are there any similar studies of other economies than the US one? Any that you're aware of, anyway?
Yeah, I am not. I don't have a specific one in mind. Where I would go to look for some of this stuff is Sweden and Norway. Those guys. I have somewhere a giant binder that is filled with either an IPD conference set of abstracts or something, and I just remember a ton of really good IPD-oriented, lean process-oriented analysis coming out of several scholars in Sweden and Norway on the topic. And I guess, if I understand the problem. People are going to tell you, oh no, we're tremendously efficient. We don't waste any time. I challenge those clients to let me take that, above average fifth grader out there and stand him in a Ono circle all day on their project.
Sure. Fantastic. Well, James, thank you ever so much for an awesome presentation. Frank, somebody that it sounds here, says, thank you for a great lecture once again, James. This isn't the first webinar of this kind that I've attended, and once again I was very impressed with your ideas and philosophies. One of the main tenets of your vision for proper IPD is the basis of trust and mutual respect, the benefits of which are there for all to see. In the hideous wastage of the adversarial nature of our current bid design build system. My question is, how on earth do you foster such trust and mutual respect from people that are busy screwing each other? I think I think we can leave it on that one, huh? That's coming from a friend of yours, from the sounds of it as well, James.
Yeah. I have a plan for it.
Which is
get out Granny's horse quirt and beat them off of each other first.
fight over it. Huh? well, James, with that said, as I said, I'm cautious of your time. I'm cautious it's an hour and a half in now. So thank you ever so much. If people do want to get in contact with you, James, what's the best way they can do so?
The James L. Salmon at byhlaw.com is a good email address for me. The other good one is jameslsalmon@gmail.com. So
fantastic. Well,
happy to hear from anybody that has questions. And like I said, y'all had a very, very good set of questions. We didn't get to all of the questions that were posed by attendees who registered, and I'm going to try to just write up answers to all of these and post them on a blog for next week. So
where can they go for that blog? I was going to say, where can they go for that link? Will you send that to me so I can send it out to people? And
yeah, I'll send that to you. If y'all want to just peruse the blog, it's the Collaborative Construction blog on Google. So what is it? Collaborative Construction Blogspot.com. If you just put in Collaborative Construction blog, you'll find it.
So with regards to BIM REC and our services, as stated at the beginning of the webinar, we are a world-class leader in helping candidates and clients win with BIM. If you're a client looking to complement your existing team or looking to build a brand new team from scratch, please do not hesitate to either email me directly at barie@bimrec.com. That's BARIE at bimrec.com, or clients@bimrec.com. If you're a candidate looking for your next opportunity, please do not hesitate to contact me as well. Email address once again, barie@bimrec.com or candidates@bimrec.com. I'll be more than happy to help. All the team here will be more than happy to help, actually. James, thank you ever so much again. Yeah, and as I say, there's loads of people saying thank you. So thank you for your time. Really appreciate this. It's been a fantastic event. So thank you.
You bet. Thank you for having me, Barry. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, my friend. You're more than welcome. You take care. I'll speak to you soon.
All right, you too.
Thanks now. Bye-bye.
Yep. See ya.
Bye.